Good evening, everyone. We are coming at you live from the Purdy Sand Spit, and we are doing a little bit of low tide, late night beach monitoring with Stina and a couple of our esteemed and valuable volunteers. We wish
We've got a Chris and an Ashley.
there's a Chris and an Ashley. I'll let you figure out who's who. There's also way in the distance there a Kenzie and a Mike. And our small but reliable team of volunteers is out here doing a little bit of community science. We've got a really great opportunity tonight with a very low tide. That's actually not super late in the evening. So thanks for tuning in. Wow, 9 of you guys are watching here. This is great. If you want to post in the comments where you're watching from, that is always fun for us to know. And of course, any questions that you have along the way. I'm going to apologize up front about the sound quality. It is windy out here right now, so I have a microphone very close to my face, and I'm trying to block the wind with my body, but we'll see how it goes. Let us know if at any point you can't hear me or you're having trouble. And let's just check in with Stina and see what you're actually gathering here.
Yeah, so right now we're doing what's called a presence-absence survey. And so we started at the top of the beach, and every 3 meters we take a look and see what's there. So you'll see at the top of the beach between 0 and 3 meters, not a lot's going on. It's kind of that rack line, so we're seeing evidence of unattached seagrass, unattached red algae, unattached greens, some clam shells, and the beach hoppers is the only thing we found living in that top area. And then this is a great classic example of this is data that shows zonation. So as we get closer to the water, we'll see that you start seeing more life. And especially in this kind of habitat that has boulders, we really see all sorts of fun stuff, including, I think, highlights from tonight are some sand lance. So this is a fish.
Ooh, that is a good find.
Buried in the sand, and right now, Chris Gendry, he's doing some forage fish study with DNR. So we're excited to have kind of we have Ashley with
An alumni.
Kinsey, yeah, she's a PLU student. So our volunteer group is our student cohort of rockstar scientists tonight. So,
Love it.
Yeah, kind of fun to see the beach in data form, but probably more exciting.
A little more exciting to see it in real life. So
just you can see the jump where we got to this more sandy habitat here at Purdy Sandspit. Is it Sandspit?
yeah, it's a sand spit.
Okay, good. Same words.
Stina, look at the sand.
And so yeah, there's definitely still life in the sandy areas, especially because we have some of this eelgrass habitat, which as we get closer to the water line, we'll see some of the more native eelgrass, which has the thicker blades. Again, one of the few true plants in the Salish Sea.
Awesome.
So I know Chris has a skeleton shrimp that we're going to show off, and then we'll kind of go through our 78 to 81 meter.
All right, let's take a look here. Oh, that is so tiny. This is a little Caprella shrimp. They're called skeleton shrimp because there's not a lot of meat on their bones. In fact, they don't have bones at all, but they are very weird little creatures. They have like kind of 6 hook-like feet at the bottom that they use to kind of anchor with, and then they have almost like praying mantis like there. Look at that. Oh, doing a little dance for us. So cool to see those guys. And they have antenna and jointed body parts like all crustaceans do. So this is an animal that will shed its skeleton as it grows, but this is about their maximum size. About an inch or so is what we're working with. So not huge, hard to focus on, I apologize, but still very, very cool.
I think my favorite thing about these guys is they're the inspiration for the Alien.
Yeah, the Alien and Predator movies. If you look at the face of that alien, it looks identical to the face of this tiny, tiny little shrimp. They're not so scary when they're an inch, but very, very cool. Yay, Caprellas. We love to see those little guys. They're important. Sometimes when we get into the eelgrass, you'll see just a whole cluster of them. So what I'm going to do is walk us around and Oh, yeah. Yeah, let's do a quadrat together. So first, explain what a quadrat is to us.
So a quadrat for this survey is just an area that we're surveying.
In technical terms, it's what, a quarter meter square?
Not this one. It can be any size you
Oh,
want.
all right.
This is our imaginary.
Ooh,
So
good eyes to find a little tiny short crab.
in an area that's 5 meters by 3 meters. So between 78
5 meters by 3 meters is,
and
we're using the measuring tape here to figure out where we're starting and where we're going.
so this kind of
We do a little imaginary line drawing. Ooh. There's another sand lance. Oh, and a hermit crab. So we're getting him into more life. I'm also noticing a little shrimp here. This is a Crangan shrimp. Very jumpy, feisty. Here's our little sand lance here. A forage fish. Yeah, that's just a little one. We call them forage fish because they end up becoming food for lots and lots of animals. And this is a species that lives just right down in the sand, which is kind of crazy that a fish can just swoop right down into the sand.
we also have some of these lower intertidal snails, dove snails, and one called Necarius.
Yeah, little Necarius snails with they have like the unicorn horn of shells, is how I like to think of them. And the dove snails are more
Necarius
small.
might actually be a hermit crab.
Oh, look at you, little hermit. Good eyes, Dina. That is tiny.
I like the way the dove snails wave their little foot out at people. Saying, hey, all you people tuning in at this weird hour. Hi from the low tide zone.
Just give a little wave. Here's our other little hermit crab friend here. And we're talking very, very small little creatures. With the hermit crabs in Puget Sound, they're reliant on the snail shells of different species. And so there are a lot of small species of snails, and there are a handful of large species of snails, but there's not really much in between. So we see a lot more small little hermit crabs than we see of the really big ones. And the big ones, of course, are a lot faster and kind of able to outrun the tide, and so they're more subtidal. About the biggest that we see them is about, size of your fist, like a black-eyed hermit crab. Oh yeah. Yeah, polychaete tube worm. It doesn't look like much, but that is an animal. Actually, there's a handful of them here. These little tubes are hollow, and the worm actually goes down in and under, but will come up to the surface to feed when the tide comes out. Yeah, let's give him a little rescue. Only because he's a little bit in distress here. I don't even know which direction the water is. It's pretty dark out here. Oh, we've got a little area with some flow, and it might just... Woo! There you go. Bye, Sand Lance. This is a very circle of life type of fish. we celebrate seeing those little ones because we know that means potential food for larger prey like salmon and harbor seals and orca whales. Kind of everything's connected, as they say. All right, let me get out my big flashlight. Stina, was there anything else that you wanted to focus on in this?
In this area, the presence are really the presence of things. Absence.
If it's not present, it's absent, right? If you're not here to raise your hand.
Yep. We're also looking at the substrate. Kind of, we mentioned those boulders.
So, yeah, Stina's measuring what the ground is like. What's the substrate? So is it sand or silt or clay or
Gravel.
a little bit of gravel?
Cobble would be any rock bigger than 2 inches.
There are a lot of those little snails hanging out here. We usually say if it's moving fast, it's a hermit crab in a snail shell. If it's moving slow, it's probably a snail. So like right there along that meter tape, there's a fast moving snail shell. That's a hermit. There's also a shrimp he's about to bump into. A little tiny Sitka shrimp.
Yeah, and that 81 right there marks the start of our next
All
thing.
right.
So it's kind of Groundhog Day for us.
we
We called out all the things and
do it all over again.
Purdy Sandspit is one of these beaches where it's long, and part of that's because it has this really flat, sandy area. So I'm actually going to flip over to the second page.
To be continued.
Beaches like Narrows Park, you probably do about 15 of these.
Wow.
And you're all the way to like the -3 tidal zone.
Kind of crazy how the slope of a beach can really affect how much territory there is and how much life, how much competition, all of that stuff. We've got kelp crab, that's cool. A little more red algae. Right down in here, there's a few more shells. More snails, and looks like a little bit of eelgrass. Cool to see. Oh, here's a cool find. This is the... Hold on, I gotta try to balance my light and my hand here. This is a heart cockle shell, a species of clam that has a really deeply ridged and serrated shell, and they're called heart cockles because of the shape. So when they're closed, they have a very distinct heart shape, which is really cool. This one is no longer, but the shell will become recycled on the beach. It'll either become habitat for encrusting organisms like barnacles or mussels might live on it directly until the shell breaks down, or the shell will break down and the chemicals that make up that shell will get dissolved into the water and provide the building materials for other clams that are still living and still growing. So what I think I'm going to do is head this direction and block the wind with my body. Hopefully that's not too terrible for you. We'll just get down to lower tidal height and see what we can see. Got another heart cockle shell here with a couple of little shrimp inside there. These are Sitka shrimp. They're very small, translucent. When they're feeding heavily on the green algae, they do turn green, which is kind of neat. They camouflage a bit with their surroundings. In the summertime, when we find them, they're just lime green colored, which is really kind of cool. So I'm paying particular attention to these little puddles and places where eelgrass is, because that's really, really good habitat for animals. Oh, we've got some cool shrimp behavior here. Let's see if I can see it. So these are a different species of shrimp, a burrowing shrimp called a crangan or a smooth bay shrimp. They got lots of names. Here you can just see the antenna right there in between the eelgrass of one whose body is entirely buried, but the rest of him's not. You gotta be really, really close to the ground to see these creatures. Oh, here's an amazing find. Anybody want to guess in the comments what you think this animal is? If you're just joining us, we are watching, where you guys are watching from home. We are out at Purdy Sandspit in Gig Harbor, and we're looking at this really awesome animal here. Wah! Oh my gosh, you guys, I just got nearly sprayed in the face by a horse clam. In fact, there's one right here next to this mystery animal. I'm trying to get you to guess, which tells me that there are more siphons out here. Here's the animal that just about hit me with the super soaker. But what I wanted to show you was this animal here. This is a moon snail. And this is a fairly large one, actually. This is a large predatory snail that is underneath the surface of the sand for the most part, but they're so big they oftentimes leave tracks and kind of marks up at the surface. So what I'll do is try to balance my phone and my light and my microphone. And the wind is blowing my poncho over my head. Oh my gosh, you guys. It is. Talk about the difficulties of filming out here. Alright, so what I'm going to do is, of course, my headlight is not very bright. So I'm going to try to show you this animal. I really apologize for the terrible filming quality. So right here we're looking at the shell of the moon snail. This is the foot, and so the animal's kind of a little bit on its side. So I'm going to kind of excavate this direction to try to get underneath and pull up gently on this animal. So I'm not harming the snail by doing this at all. This is a very, very hardy species, and look how far down it was buried, going after those clams. Oh, hold on one second. I'm about to lose my whole poncho here. Okay. This is terrible filming quality. Normally I have a buddy that seems busy doing her community science. So this is a predatory snail. They eat clams. It's one of the largest snails. It's definitely the largest snail that we would see intertidally, but they are one of the largest species that you can see within the whole of the Salish Sea. There is one that's a little bit bigger called the Oregon Triton snail, but this is about as big as they get. And if we just wait patiently, what we'll probably see is this animal begin to try to dig down through that sand again. They eat clams by scraping through their shell with their tongue, called a radula. They also secrete a little bit of acid in their saliva to try to weaken that shell and make it easier for them to scrape through. They almost always drill very close to the umbo of the shell, or kind of the hinge where the shell is joined to the other side, and that's where the muscle that holds the animal shell closed is. So if the moon snail can damage that muscle with its radula, its licking tongue, then it can get inside and eat the rest of the clam. They're very efficient predators. They eat about a clam every 4 days or so, which is just amazing to me. So there was a clam. I'm now hovering over the clam that just squirted. Hopefully he's out of water. But very cool to see. Oh, and here is something really cool to see. All right, I'll go back to that moon snail in a second. But there is a sea slug here. You're going to have to take my word for it. It just looks like a ball of snot, but this is actually a really beautiful animal. Somewhat related to our snail, only instead of having a spiraled shell, this animal has no protective body covering. So this little blob here, this little nudibranch or sea slug, is about 1 inch right now, but I would guess that when he's fully inflated with water and supported, he'd maybe be 2 or 3 inches. And it's got a little bit of orange and kind of black and white coloring on him, which is really pretty. I think this actually might be a giant swimming nudibranch. It's just a small one. So this, if I'm correct, is one of the larger species that we see in Puget Sound, and they get about 12 inches long. And what's telling me that it's probably that species is the little bit of white margin that I see along the edges of their foot. That's indicative of that species. Of course, it's small and it's in a puddle, so it's really hard to tell. Here's our moon snail. I'm going to actually just leave this moon snail out, and we'll come back and check and see how well it's been able to get down under the sand here. He doesn't have to worry about any predators at this size, and especially at night. The only thing that would really bother munching on this moon snail would be something like a red rock crab, which most of the red rock crabs at night, they just kind of hunker down. Super cool. Yes, Howard, you're right. The giant swimming nudibranch is not swimming, but it's one of the reasons why we do see them kind of washed up on the beaches. In kind of September, October, we got a number of inquiries on the Harbor Whale Watch messages about them. Here we've got a bunch of little shrimp See them jumping around. If they were swimming, they would be able to get away, but since they're kind of stuck here, there was a puddle that has now been absorbed. They're just going to hang out and wait for the tide to come back. And the tide is really far. It's about a negative, I think, 3.2 tonight at about 10 till 11. So we're just going to hang in here as long as you guys are willing to put up with me and as long as I'm able to withstand the cold, which who knows how long that'll be. It's very, very cold out here. Right. Oh, this stuff like this drives me crazy. Okay, it's a leaf. It's totally natural. It's normal. Like, this is nothing to be concerned about, but this gets my brain all excited, and then I get let down because it's just a leaf. All right. Got a couple little shrimp. Oh, see, here's a nudibranch. Here's two. You guys, this is what they look like when they're all fluffed out and supported by the water. And yes, these are the giant swimming nudibranchs. Dendronotus iris is their name. And you can see that white margin to their foot. Really, really pretty. Let's see if I can get both of them in the shot here. And this is a species that eats anemones. In particular, they really like to eat tube-dwelling anemones, which is an anemone that's adapted to living down in the sand. And what this nudibranch does is it crawls along the bottom, sinks its little radula. They have a radula just like the moon snails do, and they kind of grab a hold of the anemone. The anemone panics and goes into its tube for protection, and it actually pulls this predator down with it. So in the comfort of the anemone's tube, they get to eat them. And right next to it, there is a Crangan shrimp. He's buried just about totally. You can still see his antenna and a little bit of his tail. But yeah, and we are experiencing our normal time. Oh, here's another nudibranch in this puddle too. Super great. So yeah, the king tides and the kind of lower than average low tides is what happens when you have the sun and the moon pulling in the same direction. It's called a spring tide, but that it doesn't only happen in the springtime. The other type of tide is called a neap tide, and that's when the sun and the moon are kind of pulling at opposite directions. And so the effect of the gravity of both the sun and the moon is kind of divided between the two of them. So we don't see as drastic of tides. Here's another one. Wow, this is really just a night for nudibranchs. And for scale, this guy's about an inch across. Not super big. There's lots of hermit crabs in this little pool, as well as more of those Crangan shrimp, and all the little fast-moving things are mostly Sitka shrimp. All right, everybody else is way over there. So that tells me that they are working on, they're doing more exact counts right now. So our community science program is really focused on gathering data. And what makes it perfect for a community scientist or just your average people, you don't have to have a degree in biology. You just have to be able to get to the beach and able to count in order to do this type of program with us. Not right now, of course, due to COVID. We're running on a very skeleton crew of volunteers. Normally we would invite all of you to come to the beach with us during these low tides, because it goes a lot faster when you have lots of bodies on the beach doing these counts. And what they'll do is they have these little squares that they will lay out at certain intervals along the whole length of the beach, and then they just count every organism, or they estimate percentage cover for what's there. So if there's a rock covered with barnacles, they will estimate how many barnacles are filling that entire kind of surface. Oh, here's kind of a macabre sight. We've got a dead crab here that is covered with these nacerious snails. These are scavengers, so they have a really, really cool, I don't know if you can see it. Look at the ones in the sand. You see they have this kind of proboscis that sticks out. It looks like a big long snout. It's really, really good at sniffing out dead stuff. So they will stick that proboscis up in the water and catch the scent of something stinky and dead, like this little crab here. The squares that they use, I believe, are 1/4 meter, but don't quote me on that. It's been a while since I've done our community science. So now I'm getting down to the lower tidal heights, and we will see more of this eelgrass. Here are some larger crabs. These are about 2 inches across. Oh, here's a beautiful example of one of those larger species of hermit crabs. So this is a black-eyed hermit crab, and they can actually live in a full-grown moon snail shell when they get to be full size. This one's just a little one, but they have these beautiful eyes on stalks that can kind of reach out and see behind them. This one has a shell that's covered in hydroids, which is really kind of neat. And some hermit crabs actually kind of almost farm their hydroids. I'm not quite sure what the purpose of that is, but cool fact to know. More of those little Necarious snails hanging out here cruising. And Necarious snails are one of the faster snails. So I know I said earlier, if it's moving slow, it's a snail. If it's fast, it's a hermit crab. But Necarious snails can go quick, but not quite as quick as this hermit crab. And you'll notice the hermit crab has these great long antennae, and they reach out to the sides with those so that they can feel anything kind of coming from behind their shell, which is a really great adaptation if you have a shell for protection, but you can only look out the little hole in the front. I'm feeling a little bit like a hermit crab myself in this poncho because I can't see anything, but I'm dry, so it seems worth it. All right, so there's a big eelgrass bed here. I don't really want to walk across it, but I think I can kind of skirt it a little bit. This is really delicate habitat, so we don't want to mess with too much, but oh, what do we have here? I'm going to let you guys wonder about what's happening here. It's either a crab that has just molted, or we've got kind of a mating embrace, although crabs mate face to face, so my guess would be that this is a crab that has recently molted, and to test that, I can just touch it. That crab's a little soft, so crabs, in order to grow, have to shed their external skeleton, their hard outer shell, their armor, and so they kind of unzip it and they just pull right out of it. Can you guys hear me okay if I'm facing into the wind? I tried to do a test earlier before we started, but of course now the wind has picked up significantly, so let me know if you can hear me, or I should keep blocking with my body a little bit. All right, I found a little kind of path almost through this eelgrass so I can get out to this outer section without stepping on anybody. We got a green shore crab. Normally these guys are more in the upper sections of the beach, so it's kind of cool to see one down here hanging out. I can tell that it's a green shore crab by looking at the little tiny hairs on their walking legs. Also, it's kind of greenish. But color is not always a great indicator for what you're looking for on the beach. Okay, I think I see something, so I'm going to carefully navigate. Oh, yes, this is what I was hoping for. Another wonderful moon snail here. Oh, good. I'm glad you guys can hear me. That's excellent. I'm using my microphone, which is helpful, but again, hard to tell. All right, sorry, I just dropped my flashlight. So this moon snail, it looks like there's another moon snail here, maybe. It might just be a shell. But this moon snail is headed down into the ground, feasting on clams. A lot of times people will say they saw the eye of the moon snail, which is not an actual eye. The snail has no eyes at all. They have 2 antennae that kind of give them some sensory input, but that's about it. The whorl, the kind of bullseye that you see there, is just the spiral of their shell. Really cool. I'm curious to see if this is a live one or not. Nope. Nobody home in that one there. Snails have this great torsion, which is an adaptation that is entirely to get their butt not to be like a one-way thing, right? If you're in a shell that doesn't have an opening, the back half of your bowels is just going to empty out to nothing. So that is no good. So snails kind of twist themselves around inside their shells so that they can go to the bathroom and it doesn't get stuck in their shell. I'm sure there's probably other reasons for it too, but it's really kind of neat. Here's a piece of clam shell or crab shell from a red rock crab, recently dead. You can still see bits of it. My guess would be a seagull or somebody munching on that creature. All right, I'm going to go back to a little more solid ground so that I'm not walking in this delicate habitat. There's a little baby red rock crab down in there. The juveniles really seem to like the eelgrass beds. Not only are they a source of food and abundant kind of shelter, but they slow the wave action down. So they kind of help the animals conserve energy as they're navigating. They don't have to worry about getting blown around by large waves. All right, let's see. Okay, well, hopefully it's much warmer where you are. It is really chilly out here. It's raining. It's about, I think, 44 degrees out. Oh, here we go. Here's another large moon snail. Super cool. This actually looks like two moon snails. Moon snails do come together and they do mate, so there are males and there are females. Supposedly you can tell the difference by looking at the thickness of their shell, but I've not confirmed this. The only really way to tell is to dissect them, which, you know, we're Herber Wild Watch, not Herber Wild Kill, so we generally don't dissect living animals, but they are really, really cool, gigantic snails. Yeah, the eelgrass habitat is really critical and very important for a lot of creatures. They'll use them as nursery habitats, and eelgrass habitats are on the decline. Oh, here we go. Here's another one. We're just having moon snail everywhere. That is so fun to see so many of these guys. Here's another hermit crab. Hold on. The wind is... Whew. Pardon me for 1 second. Okay. There's a hermit crab here in the moon snail shell. See if we can coax them out here. Come on out, little crab. We won't hurt you. You get your 15 minutes of fame here. Eelgrass beds are on the decline, and so there's some effort being made to do some eelgrass restoration, and it's very much like kind of planting sod in your lawn. They take these eelgrass runners that have been kind of cultivated, and then you can volunteer to go out and plant them, which is really great. The moon snails aren't necessarily nocturnal or diurnal. They're out kind of all the time. They're just really slow and visible on the low tide. So we see them just as much during the summer months when the low tides are happening during the day. Here's a cool find. I got really excited for a moment thinking that this might be an octopus, but no, this is another cool multi-armed creature. This is a pink star. This is one of the largest 5-rayed species of stars. They can get about 3 feet across, and they get really, really big. So great to see. This one's regrowing an arm. You can see that smaller arm isn't quite the same length as all the rest. That just means that this is an organism who's had a bit of a rough life and is able to put their powers to regenerate, to work. A really incredible adaptation that a lot of invertebrates have is the ability to regenerate body parts. Octopus can do it, crabs can do it, sea stars, of course, can do it. There are not too many vertebrates that can regrow a limb. There's a couple of lizards that can. There are some amphibians that can. But in general, this is something that is a superpower just for the invertebrates. Let's see, what else can we find out here? There are so many of those snails, those dove snails. They're literally just everywhere. Ooh, there's a little crab. That's so great to see. If you're just joining us, if you want to post maybe where you're watching from, we love to see how far our videos are going, especially during this kind of weird time when we're doing all digital programs. Normally I'd be inviting you to the beach to come hang out with us and gather some scientific data and get your feet wet with us, but not right now. It's just not quite safe, so we're gonna play things really, really safe this year. We're in the process of coming up with our plan for 2021, so we have some really cool and exciting digital adventures for you. So thanks to all of you who like and follow and share and comment on our page. That really helps kind of get our message of stewardship and inspiring care for this magical habitat. You guys can't tell, but there are some splashes at the shoreline. I'm wondering if those are maybe some fish. I can see another moon snail out here. This one in the water. Kind of tell the direction that they're traveling a little bit. So they use that big muscular foot and they secrete mucus just about constantly. People always ask us, why don't you have moon snails in your touch tanks? And we do for our temporary touch tanks if we can go out to a location and just pull one temporarily. But for our permanent touch tanks inside the Scansy house, they just make too much of a mess. They are constantly secreting slime, mucus, and it's pretty gross. Plus, they have a pretty voracious appetite. They eat a clam about every 4 days or so, which doesn't sound like a lot until you have to keep the clams alive, too, until they're ready to be fed. It's the trouble with keeping carnivorous animals in captivity. So we generally just leave them out here in nature and bring people out during the low tides to explore them. We encourage all of you, if you're safe and able to get out during a low tide, you should definitely do it. Consult your local tide charts. There are some great apps for that if you're handy on your smartphone or the internet. You know, it's got plenty. This is a really cool moon snail. He's got his antenna up. I don't know if you guys can see. There are two antennae. They kind of have like a black margin to them right at the front of their shell. That's how you can kind of tell which end's the head and which one's the rear. So nice to see so many of these predators. Predators can be a good indicator of ecosystem health because they wouldn't be there if there wasn't an entire ecosystem to support them. So when we have healthy eelgrass and good clean water and we have abundant plankton, then we're going to have things like clams that are abundant enough in population to feed a good number of these predatory sea slugs, the moon snails. So whenever we find lots of predators, that's always a good thing for us. Kind of like if you were out in the woods and you were able to find, wolves or cougars. The presence of those animals is really important. So here we've got a dead crab being preyed upon by all those dove snails. They're really excellent scavengers. And a good thing to find. Here's another moon snail. Oh, here's a cool animal, a live one. This is a heart cockle. Heart cockles have an amazing... Oh, check it out. Sorry, I got distracted. There's some kelp crabs here. Little ones. These guys get called spider crabs for good reason. They very much resemble spiders with their small body and really long walking legs. Okay, but back to the cockle because he's just as cool as the big ones that move, that have faces. So this is a heart cockle. It's a species of clam that instead of burrowing down in the water, or down in the sand, they actually sit on the top like this. And they'll do their filter feeding up here. And They're consuming plankton just like the horse clams and gooey ducks and other clams are doing from beneath the surface, only this clam can move. And I'm actually... Okay, I think I can do this. I think I can pull this off without too much effort. I'm going to move this cockle right to where this moon snail is. Moon snails do prey on cockles. And we'll just give it a second and we'll see if the cockle can sense the moon snail and show you their predatory response. Now don't worry, I won't let the cockle get eaten. This is just a demonstration. And of course, now that I said that, nothing's going to happen. This is what happens when you work with wild animals, right? But the cockle, what it'll do is instead of being buried down in the sand, it has the ability to kind of kick itself free. They have a large foot, which most clams use for digging. This clam uses for kicking. So if it senses a threat, either from like a sea star or a moon snail, what it'll try to do is get out of range. And you don't have to go far or fast to outrun a moon snail, right? And the moon snails take advantage of the other clams that are buried, but cockles have a much easier time of kind of escaping a little bit. All right, nothing. Let's see. I might be able to encourage our... The cockle has to feel the moon snail in order to react. They can do a little bit of kind of chemical sensory. They can like smell the water, but since it's low tide right now, there's no water covering them, so we got nothing. This is a really striking demonstration when it works. We've seen heart cockles kick themselves about a foot or two away from a predator. Oh, I see a little bit of movement in our cockle shell. You can see them opening just a touch. Their shells aren't quite touching anymore. And neither one of these animals can see, so shining a bright light at them is not harming them in any way. The moon snails this time of year are not really reproducing. That's why we're not seeing their egg cases. That'll ramp up in the spring. And they use the kind of the timing of the tides and the water temperature and the day length in order to time that. That's how most animals, they kind of have a little bit of an internal clock. Oh, we're seeing a little bit of movement on our cockle here as the moon snail moves. Again, we're dealing with mollusks, and nothing really happens fast with mollusks. But hopefully you're about to see the fastest clam that you've ever seen. I apologize for the wind. Maybe I can block a little bit better with my body here. So we actually got 3 mollusks here in the shot. We've got the heart cockle clam, the big gigantic moon snail, and then the tiny little dove snail hanging out on the top there. All right. So how long will people stare at a clam and a snail? Maybe we'll go put our cockle back where we found it. Of course. Oh no, here we go. Okay. So the cockle is going to kick its foot out. How cool was that? Okay, it was kind of a little anticlimactic, but look, he got away a little bit. All right, I'm going to put him back. I don't want to stress him out too much by making him exert extra effort, so we'll just put our cockle right back where we got it from. Farewell. Thank you for that demonstration. That was excellent. You're a very good ambassador for your species. Thank you for being so scary and threatening, even if you did it very slowly. All right, thanks you guys for hanging in there for that. I just wanted to capture it since I mentioned it. Ow. Here is a graceful crab that is showing off some of their adaptations to be able to be buried down into the mud. So this is a crab that can dig down with their kind of back legs and then use their pinchers as almost bulldozers to kind of make a space for themselves. And then they have their antenna, tiny little antenna, and their eyes on stalks right at the top. So they can bury their entire self and have just their little bitty eyeballs hanging out, which is kind of cool. All right, let's walk along a little bit. We're getting now, I believe, we're to the lower part of our tide. And I think it's below a -3 foot tide today, which is pretty great. I, of course, am happy anytime we can get out on the beach and it's negative at all. But these particularly lower than average nights are always fun because sometimes you get to see cool stuff. Oh, here is a European soft-shelled clam showing the mark of the moon snail. So that hole that's down there by the hinge is where a moon snail murdered it. I always tell kids, like, okay, you got to be a detective. You got to tell me which clams were murdered. This one has no moon snail marks on it, but it's still dead. So sometimes you can't tell. Even the best detectives can't solve all the mysteries sometimes. But it is kind of fun to come to the beach with the idea that you're looking for evidence of animal life. Because even on a high tide, if you come to the beach and there's not much beach, you can still see evidence that all this life is out there. You might see a bit of eelgrass that's washed up, or you might see a clam shell, or broken bits of crab carapace. Who knows what you can find. Some of our most popular videos were actually taken on a high tide. Here's a big red rock crab. Again, burying down. It kind of wedged up against this clump of eelgrass. But good hiding spot. The main predators of crabs are going to be anything that's strong enough to kind of crunch through their shell. So we see like harbor seals or sea lions that can eat them. Some fish species, and then giant Pacific octopus really love to eat crab. All right. Well, I think I am getting way far away from everybody else. Like, there are those tiny little dots way over there. So I think it might be a good time for me to wrap up and head back and see if I can help them with their data collection so they're not out here for hours and hours. They began at about 8 p.m. tonight, so I know they got to be getting cold. I'm getting cold too, so I think this is where we will wrap it up. See if you can see me. I am here. Hi. It's very, very dark out, so you don't get much. Okay, how about that? There we are. All right, so thank you everybody who tuned in and watched. If you wouldn't mind sharing this video to your page or recommending it to other people, that is awesome. If you want to make a donation to Harbor Wild Watch, we are a nonprofit organization. We really do appreciate all of the financial gifts that you can give. If you're a Steward Club member, we are especially appreciative of you because your membership helps to fund our programs throughout the year. And we've got a really fun kind of social coming up next week that I'm excited to kind of hang out with everybody. We're going to do a little bit of sea creature charades, so that should be pretty great. So thanks everybody for tuning in, and yeah, we'll be out here the next couple of nights, not here, but at another beach, and just collecting that data that we can only get during low tides, and the low tides in the winter are at night. So if you're a night owl, that's great for you. If not, you can always catch everything that we do. We try to save it to the page after the fact, so you can always go back and watch. So thanks everybody. I'm gonna go see what everyone else is up to.